Well, joining us now is the MP for Don Valley, a constituency which includes Conisbrough and its castle, which you saw just there. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for going to Conisbrough and stepping outside the town centre. Thank you for that.
No, not at all. It's always good to break out into the different kind of towns as well as the kind of cities or the bigger towns that people tend to go to. When I went to Conisbrough and Doncaster as well, the thing that kept coming up again and again for a reason why people voted to leave was immigration. Is that your experience?
I think it was a major factor, not just in the referendum. I think this has been brewing for a decade or more. People's concern about how immigration is managed. I think there are some employers who have exploited the free movement rules to, for example, through agencies, wholesale recruit people to work in local firms. And I think this generally sort of these themes of concerns have been pushed to one side. And it's not that my constituents are against all immigration. That's not the case. I've done my own surveys and have found that to be the case. And I think that's mirrored nationally as well. I think there's a very small minority of people who don't want any immigration at all. But they do want to feel we have a fair and managed migration system. And in some ways, Sophie, I suppose the referendum, created the bubble, if you like, in which that particular issue was a given voice.
You've spoken before about your constituents being insulted by other politicians. Yeah. I mean, do you think that some MPs, perhaps even Labour MPs as well, from London, from some of the bigger cities, don't really understand your constituents' concerns, look down on them perhaps?
I don't think they understand them, and I think their choice of words is patronising and I have to say on occasion offensive. I mean, even on social media, I mean, I never go out on social media to troll people, but whenever I've stood up for the people that I represent, and not just in Doncaster, but, let's remember every region in England outside of London voted leave, and their voice, you immediately get trolled and shut down. And some of the language that is used by some politicians and some involved in the People's Vote campaign and some of these others who want to overturn the referendum is patronising. It's saying to
what
people,
language
oh well, uneducated, ill-informed. You didn't know what they didn't know what they were voting for. They didn't know that it meant this, that, and the other. I mean, the truth is actually, I think people did have an understanding about the consequences. They knew that it would be seismic in terms of our country. And all of that was put forward by the Remain campaigners, including myself, Sophie, because I campaigned for Remain in my own constituency. But the truth is, people felt that they wanted to be outside the EU. They definitely wanted to feel like every other major country outside the EU, they wanted more control over immigration. And for my part, I feel that we need to get a deal. We need to get a reasonable deal so that we don't crash out without one, because I think that would be detrimental.
We're talking about the sort of no-deal scenario there, and saying that it would be detrimental to your constituents. Does that mean that you could envisage a scenario where you could support a deal that Theresa May came back with, even if the Labour policy was to vote against?
Well, look, I hope that Labour can support a reasonable deal. And looking at Labour's 6 tests on, for example, that we should have protection for workers' rights, the environment and other matters, I think most of those, a reasonable deal would tick those boxes. But it's not about supporting Theresa May. It's supporting what I said in the general election just over a year ago. I promised to respect the vote in 2016, to support the best deal for Doncaster, but also to not support a second referendum. So what I'm looking for in all of this is a reasonable deal. And the problem is we are now, those of us who want to get a deal, are sometimes stuck between a rock and a hard place, between hardline Brexiteers who think we can waltz off without a deal, and I'm afraid also some hardline Remainers who, for their own reasons, don't want a deal because they want to overturn the referendum result.
So if the rough offer that we think Theresa May is proposing at the minute was on the table, which is effectively checkers, a backstop involving keeping the UK in the customs union, is that something you could support?
Well, forgive me if I hold myself until I see the final deal, because I have to say we've had so many summits where we've been led up the hill and things haven't happened. But yeah, do you know what? If we have something that ensures that we can have a close relationship with the single market, a customs arrangement, that we obviously have protections in terms of EU nationals that are here, but also Brits in other parts of the EU, that during the transition, and don't forget, Sophie, I mean, I don't think Labour has taken enough credit for some of the positive changes that have occurred in the last 2 years. I mean, Keir was arguing for a transition period 2 years ago. He's argued for better protection of EU nationals and has talked about workers' rights and the environment and taking on a lot of the EU regulation into our own legal framework. We have actually won many of those demands. So I feel that if the deal that comes back, which will have to have the support of the other 27 EU members, I think if a deal like that comes back, it cannot be called a hard Brexit, and I would have to very much weigh up what my decision is. And to be honest, if it's a reasonable deal that meets all those requirements that I've put forward to support a deal, then I think I would.
So there are reports that, you know, up to 30 Labour MPs could end up supporting this sort of deal that you described. Do you think that's roughly accurate?
I'm really not sure. But I think if a reasonable deal's on the table, the question, I think, you know, for some of my Labour colleagues is, why wouldn't you support a deal? Why would you stand along Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg, who wants us to crash out without a deal? And that's the choice behind us. So if there was a vote of no confidence in Parliament, in this government, and you were talking about universal credit earlier on the programme, I would be there with Jeremy Corbyn and other colleagues voting for a vote of no confidence against the government. But this isn't about a vote of confidence. This is about whether we crash out of the EU without a deal. And I really don't think that serves the public's interest, and I don't think it serves Labour's interest to be seen to be doing that. But it's got to be the right deal, and that's why we've got to make sure that those of us who want a deal, you know, actually push for that and don't allow the no-dealers to take control.
OK, Caroline Flint, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, coming up...